Here we go.
Good evening and welcome to B'nai Israel Congregation's 2020 event to remember the 6 million on Israel's Yom HaShoah anniversary. Tonight, we welcome Sylvia Rozines for testimony about her childhood during the Holocaust. I am her son, Greg. Sylvia will share her experiences for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. What you are about to hear from my mother is a child's account of the Holocaust within the Lodz ghetto. I would like everyone to understand that every survivor that I have talked with in the last 5 decades has an amazing, beyond all odds, significant chronicle of survival. And tonight, you're going to hear one of the rare stories. How rare. Only 80 years ago, in September 1942, a horrific event that took place and will forever be a stain on humanity is that the Germans carried out yet another shocking and grotesque incident. The SS entered the Lodz ghetto to take away Jewish children. The effects on parents were paralyzing. In a state of overwhelming and total fear, many mothers were unable to continue living. The German administrator demanded the removal of all children under the age of 10 and adults over 65. The head of the Jewish Council of Elders, Chaim Ronkowski, made one of his most infamous speeches. "Mothers and fathers, give me your children." He explained that the Germans demanded 24,000 people in 8 days. He claimed that he had reduced the number to 20,000, provided that it included all children under the age of 10. Over 13,000 children and 7,000 old and sick people were rounded up. They were sent directly to Germany's first death camp in close by Klemno, Poland. Hundreds and thousands of Jews were sent to Klemno, Auschwitz, Birkenau killing centers, and directly from the Lodz ghetto, considering among them the entire population of over 200,000 of Lodz Jews, Poland's second largest city. There were an only estimated 5,000 to 10,000 Jews from Lodz who survived the war. The Red Army forces liberated less than 900 Jews within the ghetto on January 19, 1945. Tonight's remembrance events is the story of one of only 12 children to be liberated from the ghetto. More amazing, my mother was in the Lodz ghetto from day one until liberation. Sylvia began volunteering at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in 2014, and before the pandemic, you would have found her at the information desk. She has spoken to local schools, including Montgomery College, senior centers, and at the Holocaust Museum. Her niece, Jennifer Roy, published a book for school-age students about Sylvia's story titled Yellow Star. Her book, which has now sold more than 150,000 copies, has been published in several languages and is used in a number of countries, including Brazil, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and Spain. B'nai Israel thanks you for your willingness to be their guest on Yom HaShoah. Lodz was occupied 7 days after Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland. Please tell us who was in your immediate family and what happened to all of you once the Germans formed the ghetto.
My family was father, mother, and an older sister, Dora. We lived in an apartment what happened to be where the ghetto was. They took the older part of the city, put barbed wire all around, and a German soldier with a gun was standing all around different spots, so we couldn't escape. they brought in so many people. I remember it was 160,000, and then they brought the people from the other part of the city, and we wind up 270,000. So they had to put two families. Another family came to live in our. The room was quite large, and the kitchen was pretty nice size. And they stayed, and happened to be a little girl. I think she was my age, so I had for a while, say only a little playmate.
Tell us a little about the conditions. What conditions did you have?
In the beginning, we still had some food left over. After a while, we received a booklet, a card, and my parents had to go to the store and after work, and sometimes wait in line, and sometimes by the time they arrived already, they were out of the food. We only could get, the bread was around one slice a day. But I had wonderful parents, and sometimes they gave my sister and me more than they were eating. Across from the hallway, there was a 6-story house, and there was about 6 or 7 apartments. Lived another little girl who was 2 years older, and she had a baby brother sick in a crib. So we went to her house to keep company when the parents went to work, because we didn't want to stay by ourselves. I was at that time maybe 6 years old. I tried to make the bed, I remember, but I couldn't reach. We had those big comforters. I didn't realize yet how bad it was till we ran out of food, and I wanted to eat more, and my parents didn't have any. Food was one of the most important things in life. My father sold in the evening when it was dark. Sometimes the German soldier didn't see the Polish people came. They needed clothes, and it happened. My parents loved clothes, and they had a lots of clothes, beautiful. And I had a beautiful doll with a carriage. One day it disappeared. My father exchanged for food. We never knew how much they're gonna give us. Sometimes it was just a piece of butter, but butter was like diamond to us. And that's how we try to live from day to day. We never expected the war is gonna last that long.
What was life like after the deportation of people that began at Lodz? And specifically, what did your parents do to protect you from being rounded up and taken away?
First, they asked so many people, you have to give, there were 94 factories, and they put all the people to work according to their profession. And if you didn't have a profession, they taught you. My mother and my sister worked in a factory making lingerie for women. And one person taught the other one. They had sewing machine. And I stayed by myself. the life was very, very hard, especially in the winter time.
For the general public, for the age group that we're talking is, as when the war started, my mother was 4 years old. So we're talking about 4, 5, 6, 7. Liberation was a day before her 10th birthday. So we're talking in this range where you basically needed some adults with you. But how did they keep you from being rounded up? All the kids were gone.
No.
And you were there.
The kids in 1942 or 43, they decided there were a car going to the streets. Nobody was walking with a loudspeaker. Give away your children. We're going to send them to camp in Germany, and they're going to go to school. And here they're staying by themselves, and you're going to war. They made it sound so good. We're going to have milk. I didn't know what milk was at that time even. So some parents did give away the children. But my father and mother wouldn't. This whole story is the courage of my father. I'm alive because my father had the courage. Each time when the German came, barricaded certain street and went house to house and took the children by force. If the mother wouldn't give the child away, they killed the mother and the child. So each time my father found a place where to hide me. But after a while, the German found out where other were hiding. The last time was my worst time.
Yeah, we'll get into that part in a minute. That's farther into the question.
Okay.
So that will actually lead into this. Although your parents were able to keep you hidden, why was your family not sent to Auschwitz when the Nazis decided to liquidate the ghetto? And how were they able to keep you alive and with them during that time? All the kids were gone. How did you manage to still be there?
My father, okay. I have to continue what I was talking. Then I tell you how come some of the children were allowed to stay. They had a hard time to get the children. But I have to tell you my worst part of my story. My father ran out of places, and that night, they came at night. And I was already 8 years old, and I knew what's going on. And I woke up in the middle of the night and started to cry. I don't want to die. I didn't know they're going to kill me, but in my mind, if they take me, I will die. And I had this fear. Then I started to have fear. So in our courtyard, there was a brick wall. Behind the brick wall was an old Jewish cemetery. My father grabbed me and ran out before the German went to our house. They were going house to house. And he started to dig a hole. I don't know if he had a shovel or he did it with his hand, just enough for me to stand in the hole. Then he put the grass on top. I could breathe. And he said, don't be afraid. I'm going to make believe I'm picking up woods because we needed wood to make a fire to cook. And at that time, we were not giving anything. So we had to go to the woods and pick up. He told me this, he had to prepare himself if the German come, but they never came. I stayed there all through the night And all the next day, like early evening, my sister, she said, I don't know how I climbed that wall because it was a red brick wall. And she started to walk around and calling us the name and told us the raid is over, you can come home. So we came home. Now I'm going to answer the question, how come the German decided to leave one child per family? I remember, a pink slip, and each time they came to the courtyard, we showed the slip. I don't know if I have time to say this story, a little story. My father had a friend, he was younger, a couple, who walked with him. And they had a boy and a girl. And I remember they came to our house, sitting at the little kitchen table and crying. We don't know who to give away, the boy or the girl. So my father, they had one slip, said, go downstairs and with the girl. My father thought the boy would have more courage. And he put out, we had a big armoire, we had beautiful furniture, very heavy, and he put the little boy behind. And to make sure that he wouldn't come out, he went out and closed the door very loud. And then he came back and said in German, everybody out, everybody out. But the little boy didn't go out. They survived. They survived. Actually, they lived in America. And soon after that, a short time after, they decided to liquidate the ghetto. Everybody had to leave, but they needed some people to clean up the belonging. People left beautiful furniture, dishes, so they chose 800 people. My father was very strong, and they needed strong people to lift furniture. And I remember we were staying in the courtyard, and this time wasn't just a German, it was the leader of the ghetto, the Nazi. I don't even want to say his name. I have his name. He was hanged after the war, they found him. Bebov was his name. And he made the selection. The selection was done. We were staying in like a line, and he came close to us, and he said, my father, he can stay, my mother and my sister. But when he looked at me, he says, this little shed, she cannot lift any furniture. All the family has to go left. They never separated because it would start crying and begging. Everything had to go smooth with the German. So we had to go to the left. My father had his heart was telling him not to go. And he knew already where we will live. They took 2 factories, 2 houses were close together, and there was a special door, what the German didn't know, and the woman, one building was for the woman, one building was for the men, and there was a little door we can visit in the evening. And my father looked around and he saw there was a basement in one of the buildings. And he made a decision, and I'm sure he talked it over with my mom, that he's gonna put me in the basement. And he took, his brother also was, and he had a little boy, Isaac. He was like 3 or 4 years old, and they told me to hold his hand. And he was a really good little boy. He obeyed whatever the parents told him to do, and put us both in the basement. And his friend looked, who have children, you crazy. They're gonna kill the whole family, both families. You're not allowed to stay. And my father answered, I decided to do this. It's up to you what you want to do. And some of them did the same thing. I put 12 children, I told my niece, but I don't know exactly how many. I never talked about, to my father lived here in America, and I never talked about this at all. So I don't know how many children.
Okay, we're going to have to continue to the next, which is the follow-on to this.
Yeah,
While your parents were part of the remaining Jews who were still authorized to work in the ghetto, you were discovered by a German guard.
Yeah.
How did that happen, and what made it possible for you to remain alive?
So one morning, the door opened and German soldier came down. It was deep steps in that basement and took us out. The Germans stayed not too far in a special house. It was called the Red House, Kripa. And once you went in there, you never came alive. And they marched us, and it was winter time, and was lots of snow. The ghetto was a ghost town. And we went into the house. My father was so brave, he took his friend and they went to the backyard and they found themselves across for that house. And it happened to be the office where he used to work. He used to deliver flour to the bakery. And he saw suddenly the children are coming out. Then we went back to the camp and I didn't have a bed, so I slept in a cat, they were cats, like army with
Cots,
my
army
mother.
cots.
Cats, yes, I'm sorry. And we were so happy we could be alive. Soon after, they took maybe 10 men and they marched them on the cemetery to dig 3 large holes. And when the men came back, they were sad. They realized that the holes are for us. But that time, some people died and we were left 756 people. And so we had a leader, a Jewish leader, who he kept, he was elected to just to keep quiet. Some people quarrel to ladies. So he kept quiet and he happened to have a bottle of vodka and he gave to one guard to drink and the guard told him, tomorrow you're all gonna be killed and near those 3 holes. So he opened the doors for us and said, go hide yourself. So groups are formed because the houses were empty, but some houses had yet some furniture, didn't have time to clean up everything. So they knew one house had a good basement and group formed. This time my father couldn't believe it, that this is gonna happen. And he waited to the last minute with the people who liked him waited with him. And he went again to the backyard to see what is happening in front of that red house. And he saw so many soldiers with motorcycles and cars. Then he realized to kill 756 people, you needed many soldiers. Then he believed we're gonna get killed. So right away, we marched to the yard and we went to the house across where the German lived, because he thought that's what's gonna be the last house they're gonna search. They started to search and they put the people in prison. They didn't kill them because they wanted to kill everybody. In the meantime, the bombs were falling already. Quite close. And we knew we're gonna be liberated soon.
Okay. You and your family were among the last remaining Jews in the ghetto when the city was liberated by the Red Army's 8th Guard Combined Arms Army on January 19th, 1945. Tell us about your liberation.
So we stayed in that house, and one morning we saw a lady walking on the street. And the people who were with us, we were in one room. We wouldn't be able to survive if the Russia wouldn't come in 3-4 days. We had one bread and it was cold, and we couldn't make a fire because they would see the smoke. So was lucky that the Russia came and liberated us. And then we came out from the house and went back to our camp. We still had over there our clothes.
We'll talk about looking out the window and seeing the horses and your father not believing it. You don't want to go into that?
We saw the lady and he didn't believe. Then we were already liberated. Then some other people came. They brought the barbed wire. They wanted, and they were looting our house. They were walking in the middle of the streets, carrying the belongings.
Who was walking?
The Polish people. And we were afraid to go out. There was Russia, he was like a major. He saved our life. I'm going to go back because I wasn't asked that question. He saved our life. One time when they first started to bomb, it was far away we could hear. And one time at night, the bombs were falling. So we all came out to the courtyard and we lay down on our stomach. But we had the star, the yellow star of David, in the front and in the back. So we were laying down so many people. And this mayor noticed the yellow star, and he happened to be Jewish. So he realized those are Jewish people. So he gave orders to the other planes not to throw bombs at those people and not to throw bombs on the two buildings because we are Jewish people, and to be very careful. So the bombs were, I was laying down and I could hear the whistle. First you hear the whistle and then the bombs fall. At one time I thought it was so close to me, but it wasn't. And the reason I know this, he came, I'm going back at the liberation to our camp. He had, and a few children like I came out, and some people could speak Russia. And he explained this story, how he knew we were Jewish and not to throw the bombs. And he said he had some chocolate, so he gave to the children. They didn't have much food themselves, but they gave some food. And he said, why don't you go to the Polish stores and just take the food and take whatever you want. And if the apartments are locked, you're entitled to ask the concierge to break the lock and you can go live there. In the beginning, we were all scared to move for the Polish people.
Okay, that leads into the next question. You remained in Lodz for a little while after the war.
No, I didn't finish.
You don't have time. You have a certain amount. You
But
didn't, you can
No,
finish
I
it.
have to say this. I'm gonna finish with this. Greg, I have to. I was staying on the street with my mom, watching the people carrying the belongings of Jewish people. And my mother tells me, you know why? Tomorrow you're gonna be 10 years old. You have a birthday tomorrow. And I didn't know what a birthday meant. She said, she explained to me, you were born. And then she turned around and talked to another lady. And I was still watching the people. And I heard, she said it so loud. My language at that time was only Polish. And she said, one lady looked at us, sure, maybe 100 people were standing, maybe more. She says, look, and I know this in Polish. Look at how many are still left over. I was almost 10 years old. I had no education. My sister only taught me the alphabet and the numbers and how to sign my name, my sister Dora. And I understood exactly what she said. And I felt all my happiness like going down. And that was my gift, the liberation. Now, if you want to ask me other questions.
No, I'm done. You can keep going. Yeah.
Are we finished?
No, not yet. You have another couple hours. You didn't remain in Poland for long after the war. Why did your parents make the decision to leave Poland, and where did you go from there?
This was really, it bothers me up to today. My father started a business and he was doing very well. We had a nice apartment on the best section of the city. It was empty and we went there. There were 4 other Jewish families. It was like 4 buildings. And I went to school and I was happy. We had food. And we were happy, but pogrom started. They came to one family and took away. He happened to be a jeweler and he opened up the same store and they beat them up. They didn't kill them, so they beat them up. But in another city, they killed 800 people and some people who came back from the concentration camp.
Wow.
My father said, we survived, it's time to leave, but we cannot take any suitcase. Everything what the German didn't take away from us, blankets, pillows, comforters, new clothes we had, we only needed to wear like my mother put a suit, 2 blouses and a coat. We put the money in the lining and took the pictures, what we found in the apartment. And we made believe that we going for a walk because the concierge lived in a little house. He could tell who's coming in and who's going out. And we didn't know if he was a good man. He maybe wouldn't report us. It was a clan, like in America, the Ku Klux Klan, and they were called AK, and they did the killing. And we waited in the evening till it's dark, excuse me, to go on the train. And the train took us to the border almost the last city in Poland. And then my father hired, he saw a truck, he was carrying gasoline, and he paid money for each person. My uncle was with us, who came from Russia.
This
So
is
we were
Sylvia.
he had money. So he paid for each person, and he took us up to Berlin, and we wind up in a displaced camp. American side, at that time there were different sides. Right away, an MP came and was very nice, escort us. And in that camp in Berlin, they gave us all kinds of shots not to get sick. And
Then you went to the other DP
Then-
camp in
yeah,
Bavaria.
then we wanted to go to a camp where my mother had a brother and a sister. So we went there, they didn't have room for us, and it was very old building. So we finally got assigned to a really nice building, modern. The German officers were going there to school, I think, and had showers. It was modern, a very, very large room. We received again a little bed, a pillow, a blanket, and 5 people lived in that big, was a huge room, like half of this place.
And this was in Bavaria, so this is out of Berlin,
Yeah,
and she's in Bavaria.
yes.
Little did they know that she was in Berchtesgaden.
I went
Where
there.
Hitler's house was right up above.
Oh my gosh.
The Berghof.
We took tours. There were tours, and they told us, they showed us. We were allowed, the German were not allowed, but the people from other, what the German,
Okay, we have to go to the
Heard.
next question.
I saw lots of things. It was a beautiful place. Mountain, and you could see snow, and it was in the summertime.
All right, so after the DP camp, you went to Paris for 10 years. You went to,
Okay, then,
so talk about going to Paris.
okay,
And so the question is, you remained in Paris for 10 years before immigrating to the United States in 1957 at the age of 22. What was it like for you in France, and what happened to your family, specifically your mother?
we really wanted to go to Palestine, but we couldn't. There was no Israel. And we wanted to come to America. And in America, if you didn't have a relative, even a second cousin, at that time, they wouldn't allow. They did start in 1950. My husband came, but not at that time we wanted to go. My mother found out she had a brother in Paris from way before the war, and we got in touch with him, and he said, come over. So we had to find also a smuggler to go through the border, and we paid again by 5 persons, and this time he took us at night, and I felt it was a terrible crossing, and we arrived in the north of France, and we went to Paris, and finally, I went to school at 12 years old.
But you didn't
Not
know French.
speaking no language, but the children, I never had a chance to tell how the children, the Polish children had religion classes. A sister used to come. And in the beginning, I didn't say I'm Jewish. I learned how to cross myself. You had to cross and say the prayers. After a while, I think my parents must have told me, you have to tell them you're Jewish. So I told the nun that I'm Jewish, and she said, you don't have to take this class, go sit in the back and do your homework. She was very nice. But when it came the time we killed Jesus, it was horrible. They beat me up, ripped my clothes. I came home. My sister, it happened to her, she was in high school already. And she also had very anti-Semitic teachers because my name was maiden name Perlmutter, and they knew right away for the name we Jewish, and it was terrible. So I wanted, when I arrived in Paris and I went to school, the children were so nice and the teachers was a whole new world for me. Till I learned to speak French. Being young, you learn very fast. I speak fluently French, but Polish, I wanted to forget. My sister and I decided we're never going to speak
How about your
Polish.
mother?
In Paris, my father learned a new profession. In the beginning, we had to buy an apartment. Buying just for the key, you had to pay like buying a condo in America. So finally, all the money was gone. But my father started to work and my mother was sewing in the house. After 1951, my mother became sick and they didn't know what was happening because during the war, she used to get attacked, gallbladder attack. So they decided to operate a big professor. He happened to be Jewish, French, and my mother had cancer in the liver. And losing my mother at 16 was my biggest tragedy. Then I was left with my father. And before my mother got sick, my sister got married with a nice young man, also born in Poland, but he had relatives and in America. And he came when he was single. He was in concentration camp in Auschwitz for 3 years.
3.5 years.
Because he knew how to sew, he was fixing the German uniforms.
Okay.
And suddenly he forgot about going to America. My father made a nice wedding. It was, and then a few months after, in 48, the visa came and they said, you can go to America. So he said, I have a wife. He said, okay, you can take your wife. You have marriage certificate. And the aunt was so good. She sent tickets and they left. And the minute my sister said, if we don't like it, we can always come back. But she loved America right away. They prepared for them a whole flat was furnished. It was modern. We didn't have in Paris a refrigerator. First time she saw a refrigerator, it was like a miracle for her. And right away she started to papers for
what
us.
made you move with your father?
I really didn't want to
America?
move from France, but when my mother died, my father wanted to move and we should be the two sisters together. And it took, because we were Polish citizens, it took more than 5 years to get the visa. And we would never get the visa, but someone told us to reject the Polish citizen. We became stateless. In a matter of months, we got the visa. And I came to
57.
October the 3rd, 1957 to
22.
America.
All right. So your niece, Jennifer Roy, wrote your story of your years in the Lodz ghetto. Tell us about the book and what it has meant to you.
Do you want to hold it so that the people can see?
I really didn't expect much. Mostly we did it on the telephone. And each time she sent me a chapter, I couldn't read it. For some reason, I started to cry. I'm talking about a little girl. I detached myself. But reading the chapter made me so upset. So I never told her and I never read the chapter. So there is a few mistakes, but mostly very little. And then we did it on the telephone.
Okay, but what about the book? How has it changed? What effect, what have you heard? What has happened since the book has been
Yeah.
read by other people?
Yeah, I get, up to today, I get letters from children, how they like it. And I have friends, children who are now going to college in Chicago. Her name is, I have to say, Mary Alice. And she came to see me. She said to her mom, I want to meet Sylvia. And they have relatives in Arlington. So they came.
All
They
right, so
called
they
me
came,
up.
you've had people visited you
Visiting
from
me.
Arlington, from Chicago.
Yes.
You've had letters from schools, and it has been a big part of her life having this book that more people have touched base with her on that. So after leaving Lodz,
Can it still be purchased?
yes,
People ask.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Let's ask
Af-
questions.
After leaving the Lodz, the family was sent to the DP camp in Berchtesgadens, as we talked about. And then you moved to Paris, and from age 11 to 22, you and your father then immigrated to the United States in 1957 to join your sister and her husband, Jack, who was, like we had said, 3.5-year survivor of Auschwitz,
Gaelic.
and had Jack Gaelic, and moved to Albany, New York. So everything we're talking about in the United States is in Albany. Sylvia, she met her husband, David, in Albany, New York, and with her husband, who was also a Polish survivor. He passed away in 1999 after living for 33 years in Rochester, New York. And after he passed away that same year, she moved here to Rockville to live closer to her interviewer. Sylvia has 2 grandchildren, Jeffrey and Alyssa Rozines. A detailed review is available on YouTube of this interview. I recommend watching The First Person with Sylvia Rozines on June 28, 2018. She also spoke in 2017 and in 2019. However, the 2018 version is very, very impressive. If you go to YouTube and just type in Sylvia Rozines, she's very famous, and all her videos will pop up.
Don't you have to put the Holocaust Museum?
Nope,
First
just your
person.
name, just your name in YouTube. It works. Nobody else comes up in the family, just you. So Mom, please share your thoughts on today's program. You have 30 seconds.
This program, I didn't do such a good job. I skipped a lot because my son didn't ask me those questions. There was, I put as much as I could. It's a story who took almost 6 years. So how much can you tell in 45 seconds? But you heard quite a bit.
All right, so we have time for a question from our audience and from the video from the internet. So please make your questions as brief as possible. I will repeat the question for everyone to hear.
So for now, oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go
There's
ahead.
no questions here, so go for it.
How did you get food when you were hiding in those 2 buildings before before the liberation? You didn't exactly explain how you got food.
The question is how they got food.
Yeah, I understand. In
during-
the basement, like the children, in the evening, my father and sometimes other fathers, there was a kitchen in the camp, and we had, in the summertime, there were fields, so we picked up the vegetables. So the woman made, so they made some kind of a bread. So we were not hungry, the 800 people, like And then we went, when they used to clean up the houses, they found some food a little bit too. So everything was brought to the camp, and a woman worked in the kitchen. They were assigned my mother sometimes other ladies, and we had soup. So it was much better.
Plus her father was a flour carrier. He always carried flour around. He was called one of the vice.
This is, I didn't have time to say this.
And so he kind of sifted off a little flour here and there when they could.
One other quick question. When was her book published? The
Book was published in 2006, I believe.
2006.
Question?
So of the 800 people, you said that the Germans, when they congregated with the.
A little over 800, but
800
just
people.
under 900.
Yeah,
The number-
yeah.
It just only,
So of those people, how many people survived this roundup?
700.
no, that's who was liberated
Seven-
during
Oh,
liberation.
so it was
756 people.
Okay.
Give or take, there's the numbers, yeah, so
People-
it's under 900.
That's where when we were liberated, some passed away from sickness. So I remember 756 people.
Now, you have to remember that almost 300,000 people passed through the Lodz
Yeah.
ghetto, okay? And again, what I want to reiterate here is that the miracle is that my mother was there from the first day. It was the ghetto right then and there until liberation. Most people came through and went to the death camp.
All
When
the
they
people
did
who were
that-
there.
But when they did the poll that you had talked about, how
Yes.
many people died that night?
What?
When
even
they were
more.
rounding up
When they were
everybody.
rounding up the people.
Well, they were rounding up everybody but the 800 who were left over
So-
Left over.
so
until the
that-
Russians came
needed
in and
them.
liberated.
They needed them to, all what the furniture, what the people, the 800 took out. There was one train who went to Germany, and they had horse and buggies, and everything was taken to Germany. All the belonging went to Germany.
Any other questions in here before we take some online? Please feel free.
A friend of mine told me there's a whole book devoted to how much the German economy was kept going from all the stolen stuff, not just from Lodz, but from whatever was confiscated from the Jews. So what you're describing about the buggies loading it up and putting it on trains to Germany makes sense.
I want to answer you. When they first arrived, when they made the ghetto, everybody had to give away all the jewelries. People had paintings. They came to the house and took everything. If you didn't want to give, and if they would find it, and someone would report to that this person didn't give, they kill you right away. So everything what was sent, sure, the Germany, benefits from all those things. We had beautiful furniture, and other people had too, and everything was given to the German people.
Okay, we have more questions. How about, you want to read us some?
No, so everyone's just saying that thank you, and that you're very inspiring. And a lot of thank yous. That's what, there's no question specifically, but there's just a lot of,
I
thank
have
yous.
another one.
so yes.
When you were liberated from the Russians, you're afraid of the Polish people too, yes?
Yes,
They were certainly not the friends.
not average Polish people, but we lived in an apartment before the war. There were Polish people living there, and I never heard my parents saying anything bad.
Hmm.
But when the clams forms, like Ku Klux Klans, they did the bad work.
Mary Alex's mother is watching.
Oh.
She said, thank you.
What was it like when you were in town, when you first went to school?
First, I went to a little bit to Polish school, and I loved it. And till they found out that I was Jewish, but I had the best time in France, and the teachers were nice, and one of the teachers had a son, and he was a college boy. And Sunday, I used to go to the house. I paid to learn how the spelling was very hard. I learned to speak, so I had a lesson from him. But it was okay, and I made friends. But they never asked me what religion I am. They asked me from where you came, and I said I came from Poland. Nobody asked me in French. I learned a lot in French. I learned about art because they used to take us to the museum and to talk to us about how to get dressed. A lady used to come, she used to be a countess years ago, and she taught the girls and the boys how to get dressed, how to eat. In French, it's very important how you hold your fork and knife. We eat, not like in America.
All right, with 1 minute left, I'd like to bring you up here to thank you. Oh, we got another question. I don't know how long you want to go.
If you're not tired, then
No.
there's two more
Yeah,
questions.
it's okay.
Okay. Ooh, did I step on it? Okay. You whatever,
Did you ever think of going to Israel
after it was founded.
after it was founded in 48?
48.
By that time, my mother passed away.
Yeah.
And we already planned to come to my sister. But I sometimes feel, we had friends from France, one couple went to Israel. But I wish my father would go, maybe if my mother would be alive, but he
And-
wanted the family to be together, and my sister Dora was here.
And the
Sure.
second question, which I know, did you keep in contact with any of the other children who survived in the war in the Lodz ghetto?
No, we got separated. Each one went someplace else. And in the DP camp, I had a girlfriend. I only remember her first name. When we went to France, I was not allowed to tell goodbye because we didn't go legally. We didn't have no passports. We just pay someone to take us through the border. So I didn't keep, no.
All right,
Okay.
so we're at the tail end here. I'd like you to come up to thank you
Sure.
for setting this up. I'd like to thank everyone for coming here and for everyone being virtually and all the people who I paid, all my friends to get online. The bill is in the mail. And
I'm gonna be very self-conscious how I pick up my fork when I go back.
It's okay, I eat like the American.
go ahead.
Because
Close
I
it up,
love
Mark.
America.
So.
That was my best. I wish I would be born in this country. It's one of the best country compared when you live in other countries.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I'm very happy and honored that we could be all here tonight. And thank you to everyone who joined online. Thank you, Greg, for coming all the way here. And there's a lot of traffic on the way here, so I really appreciate it. And I'm really honored that this could happen tonight in person and online, and that this way we're commemorating with B'nai Israel Yom HaShoah.
And there was a march today, actually a few hours ago in Poland from
Are we online?
and out from Auschwitz-Birkenau. There's a 2-mile walk that took place today in remembrance. So